All right, so thanks for coming on the podcast, Julie. Do you want to start off by introducing yourself to those that might not have seen or heard of you before? What is it that you're up to at the moment?
I'm Julie Norman. I'm the MD of SOS, School Aim Yoga Solutions, and I'm also an executive primary lead for a multi-academy trust. So my work is supporting primary schools really and the head teachers to improve standards and in many ways to do things a little bit differently. I wanted to talk today in the podcast about something that's really on everybody's minds, which is about going back to school on Monday. The primaries are back. The secondaries are going to sort of wean back in over the next couple of days, certainly over the next week or so. And there's an awful lot of talk out there from the government about what schools should or shouldn't be doing. And I have my own opinions on all of that. So I'd love us today to just kind of focus on going back to school and what that means and what that should look like.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that thrown around quite a lot in the news lately. The catch up. Gavin Williamson's talking about the great catch up. What is the catch up, and what does that mean to teachers?
I think in many ways we'd love to know what that means, but I have a horrible feeling I do know what it means. And I think coming from Gavin Williamson, I think that the focus here is on the English and maths and the assumption that children have lost a year of learning and therefore they are a year behind in their curriculum learning. And I would argue that, first and foremost, I would argue that's not a fact. So to suggest that they need to catch up in English and maths is quite an insult, really, to all the teachers, the parents, and the children who have been working their socks off online, ploughing through the curriculum, but doing it all online, all remote learning, and really needing an immense amount of work on the parent part and the teacher part, but also a lot of discipline from the child. So to say that they're a year behind is a grave insult, quite honestly. Now, everyone has their own idea of what catch up should mean. I would say, yes, the children do need to catch up, but it's certainly not on their academic subjects. Yes, there are elements of the curriculum they didn't quite cover, or we will absolutely have to go over again to reinforce and make sure there's no misunderstandings or misconceptions. However, the real thing that they've missed out on the last year is anything to do with people. So hugging, hugging their families, things like team sports. So getting involved in team sports, they won't have done any of that. Playing, just generally playing, communicating, speaking and listening is something that a lot of them have missed out. Now, I'm not talking about deprived children. I'm talking about every child. There are many homes where parents are working from home and the children are doing all their learning online. How much conversation is going on in the home? It's no one's fault, it's the circumstance. And so all we have to do is say, that's okay, and it was okay for a period of time, but we have to get all those skills back for those children. We've got to seek to get all those skills back in place, build their self-esteem, and build their confidence in having an opinion and discussing it. How many debates have children had at home in the last year? Probably not many, if I'm honest. However, in school, they can debate issues every day of the week. So they're not used to the noise, and they're not used to a room full of people. They're not used to a whole hour of being completely on task. They've had the advantage of having much shorter lessons online and being able to step away and take breathers, which has been great, but we need to now get more sustained writing, reading, concentration, and build on that. So there's definitely a lot of catching up to do, but I will say not necessarily the contents of the national curriculum as such.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Think about what's been lost. Certainly the physical contact, physical engagement, and we know that that has massive weight with children's development. So there's a lot they've lost out on there. And I think in regards to what you're saying about academia, we were just saying earlier about some of the skills that children have learned actually, and the amount of development they have done, that perhaps other generations might not have been so fortunate to have, such as independence, self-discipline, resilience as well. These kind of things, you know, seem to be a dying art, and so the last couple of years has really given them an opportunity. What do you think? How do you think that would play out in practice if you wanted to, like you said, go back to sort of more physical engagement with the children, more play, more? How does that work in practice?
I think there's been an awful lot of talk about the mental health of children. Okay, that we've talked so much in education that mental health for children, their well-being is paramount on their attack. If we are going to keep having a conversation publicly, which is happening on the news, it's happening with Gavin Williamson, well, anyone really on TV keeps talking about this lost generation, these children who have lost a year of learning. They're so far behind, they'll never catch up. There's arguments over whether they'll ever catch up, whether it'll take 2 years for them to catch up. Be the child who's hearing that. Be the child who's just worked their bums off for a year, and now they're hearing all the adults around them saying they're not good enough, they're so far behind, they'll probably never catch up, they've learned nothing. What I would say is that's probably the most damaging thing to their mental health right now. Okay, so as educators, I would say to any educator out there, stop that conversation happening. Do not allow any children to hear that conversation. Also, their parents have all worked so hard, working from home, trying to teach their children and navigate their way around this curriculum, you know, and trying to keep the child happy, as well as dealing with the fact that their poor children haven't seen their grandparents, they haven't seen their cousins. They're dealing with all of this. And what are we saying in public? Yeah, you didn't do a very good job, actually, because the children are really far behind, and they're that generation who have been ruined by the pandemic, and it's all your fault. You know, the parents, the schools, and the children collectively. You've created this child who desperately needs to catch up and is so behind. My argument is we are not looking at the gains. The gains far outweigh the losses. There's no question in my mind about that. When we look at the last year and we think about the gains that we've had, first of all, as you said, children have grown in resilience, independence, that discipline. They come in, they get up in the morning, they come to their computer, they log on, they say good morning. That takes an immense amount of discipline for a child. And I'm talking about a 7-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, to take the responsibility of logging in and saying, good morning, I'm here and I'm ready to learn. Okay. That's a learning attitude we can only ever hope for. And all our children have been offering that to us. So that's a massive gain. That is such a leap forward for our children. We have to grab that with two hands and say to our children, do you even realize what you've just achieved? That you've taken this massive shift in your learning attitude, and this is going to serve you better than any intervention can ever do for a child. The other gain we've had is they have moved us through the future. They've taken us 10 years ahead in technology. Our children can use this technology, they can learn remotely. They're even savvy enough to find ways to escape lessons but the teacher not know. I mean, that's smart. They're savvy, you know. They have sussed out Zoom or Teams Meet. They've sussed out these ways of avoiding working to the teacher's timetable. So they are pretending they're online, and they have found really savvy ways to do it, and hats off to them. These are the entrepreneurs of the future, in my opinion. And what they do is they come back to the recorded lessons, they whip out the work, they upload it, and they've narrowed their school day down to 2 hours late afternoon. They have a lovely lie-in, they are working flexibly, they are being efficient, they're being effective, and they've covered the curriculum. But they've learned so much more, you know. They've learned to use initiative, they've learned about technology. If the government had said to us, every school has to be teaching remotely some of their lessons, it would have taken us 10, 15 years to figure that out. Not because we're not very smart, but we're busy people. And to implement something so huge would have taken a long time. The children, along with the teachers, did it in 24 hours. They were online and they were timetabled. And let's remember, they have been covering the curriculum. They haven't been entertained by the teachers. The teachers aren't singing them songs. I mean, they have been delivering a full curriculum to our children, and our children have been logging in and they've been doing the work because our parents have ensured that they've done that. So between the three parties, we have moved so far forward with technology. We've moved forward with attitudes to learning. We've massively moved forward with the relationship between schools and parents and children. I feel like we've always talked about being in partnership with parents, but now I'm seeing it. Now it's actually happening. Maybe not for all schools, but certainly a lot of schools have moved into that really rich partnership. That is going to massively benefit the child. The child is now surrounded by much stronger relationships and partnerships between the people that they care about. That's only ever going to help them learn even more. So,
Of course.
as far as I'm concerned, if they've missed off one unit in the curriculum, or they've missed out shape and space in maths, whatever, that is not the loss here. You know, the gains are enormous. They are gains that we would have hoped to achieve, and we have, thanks to our children and our parents and our teachers.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The idea that there needs to be this catch up is kind of based on the assumption that something was lost, the lost generation, the lost education, the lost years. When in actual fact, the reality is actually quite something. Is very different, and so what we're finding is that, like you said, a lot of gains have been made. We've been pushed into this new world where you can log on online, you can download your work, you can complete it in your own time. You can motivate yourself to do it, and then you can submit it and then go and read the feedback and share it with your colleagues. Yeah. Like you said, that would have taken 10, 15 years. I mean, there are companies that want to action this for their employees, and they've been trying to do it for 10 years. Now this opportunity has been forced upon us. The idea, I mean, what do you think about sort of moving forward? Is it a case of going back and trying to catch up on all the textbooks, or about actually let's embrace this new age of learning, let's embrace this new way of life and see how the kids fare, because actually they're faring quite well?
Absolutely. So we want, we've been talking in education for a long time about whether our curriculum serves our children. And I think it's pretty much the consensus it doesn't, because what is missing from the curriculum is building their character, is building them as young people, young citizens, global, national, local citizens. A lot of that's missing from the curriculum. And I think this is allowing us now to begin to adapt and change. And we would be absolutely foolish to have made all these gains and then take them back to the 1950s when they arrived back. That's completely against what I would want to see. Now, there are elements of education we do want to return to. Routine and structure is really important. We don't want to lose routine and structure, because that helps children feel really safe, and they know what's coming up, they know what's happening next. However, if we don't allow for the children to respond to new changes or new opportunities, then we're doing them a disservice, because life does throw us all sorts of opportunities. And we want our children to be able to very quickly analyze a situation and see what gains they can make from it, whether it be to learn something new from it, to meet new people from it, or to change their own behaviors or to take action. If we continue to just go through the treadmill of, just remember this, sit this test, remember this, sit this test, remember this, sit this test, and then out the other end, you got your A's, off you go, you're ready for the world of work. And we were talking earlier, that doesn't get them ready for work at all. Employers have been telling us for years, children are not ready for the world of work. When they come out of GCSEs, when they come out of A-levels, when they come out of university, they're still not ready for work, because we're doing the same thing. If you change nothing, nothing changes, and so we keep being told the same news, and yet we're changing nothing. The children have now invited us really to reconsider how we deliver the curriculum, how we teach it. We don't need to tell them facts and say, remember that for a test. We don't need to do that anymore. The children have proven again and again, they are resilient, they are thinkers, they are learners, they have a discipline, they have a respect for learning. And so we need to grasp that with both hands and say, okay, going forward, let's teach our children to be thinkers. Let's give them the opportunities to think and to find out information and then to know. You can't learn if you don't have facts. We know that. You need information in order to begin to learn. But collecting facts is not learning, it's remembering. It's after you've got the facts that you can begin to learn. And so that's what we need to do. We need to make that change. And the only online learning, because it's been quite difficult with many schools who have recorded their lessons rather than deliver them live, it's very hard to use AFL, that assessment for learning, during the lesson because there's no feedback from the children. So what they're doing is they're sort of doing a scaffolding session, and then they're saying to the children, okay, watch that, and then I want you to do this activity, but then come back to part two. That allows the child to watch it, consider what they understand and what they don't understand, and then start telling the teacher what they need. So they go back to the teacher and say, I got that, but I didn't really understand that. Can you explain this to me again? Or can you give me this to help me? Or can you give me... That's changed. What's happening is the teacher is facilitating the learning for the child, and the child is now delivering. The child is saying, I am seeking an education and I need this from you in order to have that. And that's
Right.
how the relationship is changing. Whereas it's always been done to the children. The teacher tells the child what to do, how to do
So,
it.
yeah, my
Like,
generation, your generation, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
what's right, what's wrong. There's no in between. It's very black and white. It's either right or it's wrong. But what the children are now doing are telling the teacher what they need in order to progress in their learning. We cannot lose that. I plead with every school out there, please don't lose that brilliant skill that the children have picked up, and really, sort of nurture that skill. Really, let's see that flourish, because what we want to do is move away from teacher-led and become child-led, so the children take ownership of their learning. They have shown initiative, they have shown commitment to their education, they've shown dedication, they've shown all of that. So let's celebrate it. Let's say to the children, who knew? Who knew that you could be this person, that you could invest in your own education and care about it enough to be here every day doing this? Let's not lose that. Let's keep that going. Let's continue that practice in the classroom. It'll be face to face rather than online, but it stays the same. The principle is the same. We're moving to child-led learning, not teacher-led, and the teacher becomes that facilitator for learning.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of work to support that. Even from my own experiences, I was telling you from when I was working in recruitment and we were trying to bring graduates through, the disconnect between what's taught in school and universities and then the real world is just growing bigger every time. And now I think there's a time when we can actually bridge that and we can say, okay, most of us have to work from home once in a while, but there was no training for that in school. There was no, I was given my work in school. I was told what textbooks to look at and what pages to copy, and then and that was it. But nowadays it's like, certainly in the last year, we've seen that kind of self-discipline, that kind of self-motivating, and if they can harness that skill and take that with them, then they're going to be exceptionally successful. I think if I may sympathise with Gavin perhaps for a moment, perhaps the idea that there is more information to collect and more facts to collect before the exams, they can pass exams. I think that might be the focus. But what you're talking about is a little bit more interesting, because you're saying perhaps things need to change, and rather than going back to collecting facts and regurgitating them in an exam, perhaps we should be looking at something different.
Right, so let's take Bloom's taxonomy, for instance. Okay, the sort of the beginnings of Bloom's taxonomy, looking at that learning model. The beginning is you collect facts. So that's the lowest order of thinking, is collecting some facts. Now that's great. You'll pass a test. See you later. They are not the children educators want to send out. Okay, if you're a real educator, a true educator, and you want that child to become a well-rounded, interested, lifelong learner as an adult, then that's just the beginning. To give them a fact is just the beginning. Then the learning happens. It's after you have the facts, you start analysing how useful those facts are. How will they help us to move forward? What's useful, what's not useful? What do other people say? What are their opinions? What's their evidence for their opinions? So then you start communicating with other people, a range of people, to say, well, that's interesting that you think that, and that's interesting that you think that, and I think this. So we have a sense of ourselves and our own understanding, of the event or the whatever we've been, talking about. So we have a true sense of what matters to us and what we care about, but we begin to get a true sense of others as well. So there's that sense of others, what they care about, and why they might see it differently, why their perception may be different, because their circumstances are different. And it becomes a much more in-depth understanding about differing opinions. And even when we're looking at science, you've got how the world began, where there's that a never-ending debate, because many people have different opinions, and it doesn't mean one is right and one is wrong. It's about building a sense of understanding. And as we work through that, Blooms, then we start evaluating, what is useful information for us going forward. So I've listened to everybody, I've formed my own opinion. In fact, now I've adapted my opinion slightly because I have a better understanding of other people. But what am I going to do with this? What is the point in learning something and getting a true understanding of it if I'm not going to do anything with it? So then we have to look forward and look at the world around us and say, how can I use this information to make the world a better place, to make people happier, to make myself happier, to make us more effective or more efficient, whatever it is you want to do. And the issue I have with fact collecting is we're not doing anything with it. It's a race to remember as much as possible before the exam appears. I'm not against exams, let me put that out there. Exams have their place, because if children do not have the facts, they will not learn anyway. So the exam will just reassure us that they have collected those facts, they've gained that information. But I think what's most important after that is that we begin that understanding, that in-depth understanding of why the facts are the facts and why opinions are opinions, and what are we going to do with this information. And that for me is when the learning begins. Now, I also think not only do we test children to check they are collecting those facts, but what we need to be doing after that then is documenting their learning, because that's the learning only starts after that. So then we have to start documenting it. So we've got to be really observing the children. We've got to be communicating with them, watching them really carefully, and active listening, really active listening, and listen to how their feelings and their thoughts are beginning to change and adapt the more they hear, the more they see. And what you're watching is learning in progress. And then you ask them to use that information now and get innovative with it. And that shows you their depth of understanding. How deeply do they really understand this? That is learning, and that's preparing the child for their future, that they are always open-minded to events that are happening, they embrace them. They must always form an opinion, but they must always listen to other people, and they must be prepared to adapt their opinion based on what they hear. And then they must think about, what do I do now, for the world around me? How do I use this? And until we do that sense of self, sense of others, and sense of the world, I'm afraid a test almost serves no purpose. All it does is give us a ranking up against other, schools and countries in the world, and schools in England. We just get ranked. Is that an education? Right. No, that's not an education at all.
No, you're right. Yeah, and the real world doesn't work like that. As I said before, there's been so much emphasis on the CV, on the academia, on the skills, the experience. When in actual fact, when it came to hiring graduates, and I was talking to hiring managers, they were coming back to me and they were saying things like, "We're looking for resilience. We're looking for adaptability. I'm looking for someone that's open to change. I'm looking for this kind of attitude, this kind of and." Like we said earlier, a lot of the schools are not enough energy is being put into that kind of real world training. But what's just happened, I think the kids have fared very well.
Absolutely. Our children,
and mention the parents as well.
Yeah, and parents. I think our parents, our children, are more prepared now this year for the future than they've ever been. So as far as I'm concerned, they've done an enormous amount of learning, and more than we could have ever planned in, really. We can't lose that. That to me is lost learning. If we go back to how it was a year ago and we forget about all of this and we go back to that didactic teacher at the front, children facing the teacher and the teacher telling the children what to remember. If we do that, there is your lost generation. You've just lost.
Yes, you're so right. That lost generation.
You've lost learning, and you've lost that generation. You've just done exactly what the government think has happened, And in fact, quite the opposite has happened. So for me, for our multi-academy trust, our summer term is looking like a project called The Future. And we're going to be asking the children to look forward, not back. But they're going to think about all the things in the last year that they have gained. We're going to be looking at the gains, not the losses, and what we're going to take forward into the future. So we're going to be looking at their aspirations, the new skills that they've gained, the characteristics they've gained. We're really going to be working hard on character and how character leads to academic success. With the right character attributes, you will learn, but you will learn at a much greater depth. And so we're going to take all of those forward. And the summer is all about building the new future. And the children will be part of that conversation. As I said, we said right at the beginning about children's mental health. And I said the most damaging thing we can do right now for children's mental health is to tell them everything they've just suffered for the last year was for nothing. And in fact, they've lost. They are behind, they're unintellectual, they're years behind other peers from years ago. They're not good enough, okay? That is the most damaging thing. What we have to do is spend time in those first 3 weeks when they come back, collecting up all the gains that we've made in the last year, all the successes that they've had, and there have been many successes. The relationships with the teachers and their peers, we need to rebuild them. We need to rebuild those really the bonding that they had before, where the teacher is the safe person, their friends are, unconditional love. They can fall out and make up, fall out and make up. We need to build that back. We need to build up their confidence to speak in a large group again. Once we've done all of that, which is the first 3 weeks back and then beyond, once we've done that, we can then start saying, okay, we are stronger people. You are stronger children. You're more resilient than you've ever been. You have all these newfound characteristics, all these new skills. How are you going to apply them in your future? And what does your future look like? And let's start looking forward, and let's stop listening to the rhetoric of catching up or lost learning. That's absolute nonsense in my opinion. Let's go forward with all the new gains and create the new future. And at the heart of that should be the children. They should be having that conversation.
Absolutely. I think, the focus needs to be on positivity. And certainly in an era where children are crying out for purpose in their learning. I remember when I was at school, the one question we all asked every day, why are we learning maths? We couldn't, and the teacher didn't have an appropriate response. They never did have an appropriate response. That's not their fault. But I think perhaps Gavin Williamson's, what he said about the catch-up, I don't think that's an appropriate response to why are we learning maths. If the child asks, why am I learning maths? I say, well, to catch up on everything you've lost. Yeah. It's so reductive and so negative. I don't see how that's going to facilitate learning like you're talking about.
Yeah, so what we need to do is really be focusing on, yes, there will be some gaps in their learning. In other words, their fluency in maths won't be quite so good. Their handwriting won't be quite as good. Their stamina for writing will have dropped for sure. Their concentration. So what we're going to be doing is focusing on lots of opportunities for handwriting, short, sharp opportunities, some really creative writing. We've got to take the children back into their imagination. We've lost so much of that. So that's something we have lost, is exploring their imagination. We need to be reading to them, and build that vocabulary again. If you think about when a child is in school, they are conversing for almost, at least 6 hours. They're conversing, whether it be with teacher or peers. They're talking all the time. And every time they talk, they gain new vocabulary, they gain new understanding. When they're at home with parents who are working from home and supporting them with their homework, they're not gaining quite so much vocabulary. So the best and quickest way to gain vocabulary, 2 quick ways: read to them and talk to them. So we need to be doing loads of that and build on the vocabulary again. All that stuff they learned before the pandemic, before lockdown, it's not gone. It didn't just get erased. If they actually learned it and then they understood it, it's not gone away. All we have to do is get back to those routines and structures, and it will all come flooding back. They'll sit there and go, oh, yeah, I remember that now. So we may spend a period just going over things, those key skills in math, key skills in grammar and writing and reading and comprehension. But the rest of the time, we have to be focusing on the games and socializing, being around people, playing and laughing. You know, when was the last time they had belly laughter? If you've ever been on play duty in a school, you hear an awful lot of laughter while you're standing there just watching the children play. There is a lot of screaming and a lot of laughter, and there's an awful lot of running. How much of that have they been doing? And for many, not very much at all. So we've
That's
got
right.
to give them that opportunity to scream at the top of their lungs, laugh till it hurts, and run like the wind's behind you. And we have to give them opportunities to do that, because we need to build all those chemicals back up in the body, all that, you know, serotonin, and get them happy and excited again and feel good. All those feel good hormones need to be swimming around. And that's what we are going to be catching up on. That's catch up to me.
Okay. Okay. A lot to take in there. So there's a lot that teachers can do, a lot that schools can do to kind of help help the kids catch up on, you know, on this on everything they've lost in terms of, you know, the physical world. How can parents help as well? What can they do?
Well, first of all, parents need to take a couple of hours to themselves and just drink a cup of tea. And
Yeah.
they need to acknowledge, you know, what they actually have achieved, whether they are working from home, whether they're not working from home. Having your house filled with children all day, every day, for that many weeks has got to send someone over the edge. So they should be immensely proud of what they've achieved. They have worked so closely with the schools that the relationship that they formed with the schools will massively benefit their children. And for that, they should be proud as well. They should be so proud of what they've achieved. Their children will always remember them for that support with their academic achievement and their learning attitude, that shift in learning attitude. A lot of that's come from the parents encouraging them or poking them or screaming at them, one or the other. But certainly the parents had a big part to play. Now, for parents, I would say, you now understand what your children are learning and how they learn. Don't lose that knowledge. You've just gained a huge amount of knowledge about how schools work, how children learn, how teachers teach. Don't lose that, you know, build on that. Get more involved in your children's learning. Get more involved in how children understand things. Know that the more you discuss it with them, whatever it is that they're learning, and the more you allow them to ponder and think about that learning, the deeper their learning is. So start enjoying conversations about the learning with the children, and start communicating with the teachers. The teachers want you to communicate with them. Start communicating and saying, what can I do? How can I help? How can I get that deeper learning for my child? And read with your child. If your child is 16, read to them. Read them a bedtime story. How many adults buy audiobooks or, you know, they download audiobooks? Because we all love being read to. And when
Yes.
they turn 8, they don't stop being, you know, wanting to be read to. So I
That's a
would
really
say
good point. Yeah.
the best way you can help your child's mental health right now is to just have them lay on the bed, sit next to them, and just read to them for half an hour before they go to bed. It's simple, it's so easy, yet it's
Yeah.
so incredibly effective. It'll build their vocabulary, it'll build their self-confidence, it builds their relationship with their parent. They feel that their parent is really engaging in their learning and their school, and that gives them a real sense of security and love. And you can't go wrong, can you? So yeah, for
Absolutely.
all those parents, don't lose all that knowledge you've gained. Please don't. Jump on board, get involved, and keep that relationship with the school going. They need you as much as you need them, and your child needs both of you.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Sounds very, very promising. Which is a complete contrast to what I've heard on the telly.
Yeah, it could be exciting. It could be the best change that children can have, and it could be a real build on all their learning this year. So good luck to all the schools out there, and I really hope they put. I've always said it. A phrase I've used over and over again is never take your eye off the customer, and your customer is that child, and the one person who's standing behind that child is their parent. So never take your eye off the customer. And just when they come back, when they walk in the door, what do they need most from you? And I want you to think about social, emotional, relationships, most important, as well as academic. Academic is a part of that growth going forward. So do what the children need and not what the DFB send in guidance.
Yeah.
I would take that with a pinch of salt and focus on the customer always.
You mentioned some really, really good things about project-based learning, and I'd really love to dive into that next time if we could sit down for half an hour. I want to hear about that, breaking away from the curriculum and putting purpose into meaning, purpose into education, because I think it's fundamental, really. But I just wonder if there's anything you wanted to say at all before we sort of come to an end.
I guess if you are, really thinking about embracing building on children's thinking so they become deeper learners. This is your greater depth. If you want to learn more about that, you want to find more about that, I can be contacted through School Omega Solutions. But also any training you want on that, I can provide. But also, even if you just want time with your staff and stop and take stock, really important. Take some time to say, what have we gained? What's come from the last year? What are we taking forward? What are we leaving behind? Take some time to do that. And over the next 3 weeks is perfect for that. And if you can do that before the Easter break, and then through the Easter break, staff have time to think about it, and then go forward with all the positives and leave any of the negatives behind. Keep in mind as well for your staff, it's not just children's mental health. The staff are exhausted. They're emotionally drained. They've missed the children so much. They didn't want the children learning from home. This wasn't their choice. And they will be desperate to get the children back. It's an emotional roller coaster for staff. So also think about the new skills your staff have gained that they can take forward, and not the losses. Stop thinking about any losses. Your staff have moved education years forward. And so grab that and work with them and build on that. Yeah. But back to the project learning as well. It's about keeping your eye on the customer. And if we want our children to be prepared for real life, then they have to take part in real life. So what we do is we create projects that enables them to learn about themselves, learn about others, and then learn about what changes are they going to make in their community, whether it be local, national, or global community, to make the world a better place for them and for others. And so, for instance, our project this summer is based on the future, as I said, but we are looking at a project called Gravity in Somerset. There's a new project called Gravity where a huge arena is being built. It's all eco-built. It's amazing. It's incredible. It's got loads of leisure and homes and businesses, and the children are going to be part of how can we build the future and what would it look like. And I think they're in the best position to start having those conversations. So I'm really excited about that project, but their input will go into the Gravity project. And so they will make a sustainable difference. They'll go to that Gravity place in 5 years, 10 years, and they'll enjoy the leisure facilities, and they'll look around and they'll say, I had an opinion on that. I shared my opinion on that. I was on the project team talking about that. Our school came up with that idea. And now I can see it in reality. These are the children we want to send out into the world. These are the children with the characteristics, the knowledge, but also the depth of thinking and analysis and innovation to create the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important for children to see the fruits of their labor as well. At work we get paid for it, but the children don't get paid. So, having a project, something they can actually see, something that's tangible, they can touch, they can take photos of. That I think that's going to add fuel to a lot of the fire.
Yeah, definitely. And I know where we're going. I know where we're going in my multi-academy trust that I work. But as the managing director of School Omega Solutions, I help schools to reinforce what is your intent, what is it you want for your customer, and I sit with them and we go right back to the beginning. When your child leaves the school, what do you want them to lead with A
Yeah.
levels, GCSEs, SATs results, or characteristics, or both. Evidence of having really had an input into their local community as well as their global community. So we go right back to the intent and then say, okay, well, if that's what you want for your child, is your curriculum doing that? And if not, let's change the curriculum. So that's the work I do at schools, so that we go to the intent, we go to the implementation, and we look at the impact. You know, if we do all of this and we get it right, what will we see? And I think it's really important that schools do that now. This is the time to do it. You need to now stop and evaluate, take stock, and reevaluate that intent for your customer, and then reevaluate what implementation will actually get them there. Because we say we want all this for our children. We want them to be mentally healthy, resilient. We want them to be lifelong learners. We've been saying this for 10 years, the phrase, we want them to be lifelong learners. And we've been saying this for years. We keep using all the same terminology, but our curriculum is not delivering. Yet we still keep pumping out the same curriculum. Why? So stop it. You know, change your curriculum. Now, if you're using the national curriculum, if you narrow it down to its most basic statements, it's not actually that big, to be honest. The national curriculum is quite sorry. The national curriculum is actually quite compact. But it's about, you know, how you teach that national curriculum, where it's taught, how it's taught. That's what's key, and that's where your implementation has to change. Yeah, so if any school wants help with that, then I can always help with that. It can be online, face to face, whatever. But we do need to do this. We do need to say, gosh, we've learned so much, more than we ever thought we would learn. The gains are 90%, the losses of 10, we'll make those up. We're not concerned about that. That will happen because that's what schools do. They're masters at what they do. And my last thing to say here is, teachers are masters at what they do, and we have to give them credit. They have adapted, they have continued to teach, they have continued to facilitate learning for children through all the ups and downs, including the emotional stress they've gone through of not having the children with them. And they are masters at their art. So when they come back, the DFE will tell us what our children need. Gavin will tell us what our children need. But I can tell you, the only people who truly know what our children need are their teachers. So give your teachers time with their children to assess what their needs are as they come back, whether it be academic, social, emotional characteristics, and then let the teacher tell you what these children need, and then sit down, take stock, reevaluate your whole implementation, and go forward and don't look back.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very, very informative.
Bit of a rant, but yeah, I feel quite passionately about you know, about all of this, and that children are learners, you know, and we have to give them time to learn. And another podcast we could do is I also get quite frustrated with the fact that people punish children when they make mistakes with their behavior, and we don't accept the fact that behavior is also something for children to learn, and we must teach as learners through behavior, just as we would in maths and English and geography and science. Well, behavior is also another subject matter that they need to learn. And so we'll do a podcast on that one day, because I have a lot to say about
100%. Lots to talk about.
my eyes. I haven't considered really the sun shining in on me, but anyway. But yeah, it's been really lovely to just take the time to think about what we need to do from here. And we've got to stop listening to this catch up being an academic thing and think a lot deeper about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much.